Welcome. In this explainer, we're going to be looking at a really powerful set of ideas that help us see world politics in a completely new light: post-colonial and decolonial theory. Seriously, think of it like getting a new prescription for your glasses, one that suddenly brings the hidden histories and power structures of our world into sharp focus.
Okay, so you've probably heard this before. In a lot of history books, the 19th century is framed as the Hundred Years' Peace, a time of relative stability and calm in Europe. But here's the thing. That simple description raises a really important question.
And that question, peaceful for whom, is the exact starting point for all of this. Because while things might have seemed stable from London or Paris, for most of the people on the planet, this period was anything but peaceful. It was an era of violent imperial conquest and the massive expansion of empires across Africa and Asia. So, to get a clearer, more honest picture, these theories offer what you could call a lens correction. They challenge us to stop looking at world history just from the perspective of the winners and instead to center the experiences of empire, colonialism, and race that have so often been pushed to the margins. Now, this isn't some single, rigid theory. It's better to think of it like a toolkit, a way of asking different questions that challenges the very foundations of how we see the world. It makes us rethink everything, from what a state is and why wars happen, all the way to the rules of global trade and international law.
And what's really fascinating is how this lens reveals the hidden power dynamics in the words we use every day. Take this example. A professional from the US living in Kenya is almost always called an expat. It sounds kind of temporary, even privileged. But a professional from Kenya living in the US, they're called an immigrant, a word that often carries the sense of permanence and a much lower status. See, these words aren't neutral at all. They're packed with the baggage of colonial history.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. How exactly does this lens work? What are the core ideas that power it?
So, a huge concept here is neo-colonialism. This term was coined by Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first leader of independent Ghana. And his argument was just so powerful. Just because a new flag goes up doesn't mean the old control is gone. It just changes form. It continues through economic dependency, through foreign debt, and through intense political pressure.
And then there's this absolutely crucial idea: Orientalism. Thanks to the brilliant scholar Edward Said, we now understand that this isn't just about exotic art or old movies. It's a deep, pervasive mindset that creates a hard line between a supposedly rational, civilized West and a so-called irrational, exotic Orient. And this way of thinking wasn't just some side effect of empire. It was the very thing used to justify it. This leads us right into Eurocentrism. This is that subtle, often unconscious habit of placing Europe and its history at the absolute center of the world's story. It's the assumption that European development is the default path, the standard that everyone else is measured against. And of course, when you do that, you automatically devalue countless other rich histories and cultures.
The human toll of all this is just devastating. The poet and activist Amy Césaire captured it so brutally and perfectly with this simple equation: colonization equals thingification. His point was chillingly clear. The ultimate goal of colonialism is to strip people of their very humanity, to turn them into objects, things, to be used for profit.
But, and this is so important to remember, this was never a one-way street. Resistance was always there, always. From the incredible Haitian Revolution, where enslaved people actually overthrew their French rulers and created a new nation, to the huge anti-colonial movements that swept the globe in the 20th century, this long, powerful history of fighting for freedom has completely shaped the world we live in today.
So what happens when we actually put on these new glasses? When we use this corrected lens to look back at familiar historical events? Well, things start to look very different. Okay, let's take World War I. We're taught to think of it as a war between European nations, right? But just look at this map from 1914. It tells a totally different story. This was not a war of nations. It was a war of empires clashing over colonial territories. And it was fought by millions of soldiers from India, from Africa, from all over the world who were pulled from the colonies to go fight and die for their imperial rulers. This lens helps us spot a very distinct type of conflict: the imperial war. These aren't like other wars. For one, they are fundamentally expansionist. They're about grabbing land and power. They're also usually asymmetric, pitting high-tech armies against local resistance.
And maybe most importantly, their real goal isn't just to defeat an army, it's to control and discipline an entire population.
And once you have that framework, you can re-examine more recent conflicts. So take the Vietnam War. It's usually talked about as a Cold War proxy fight, but look at it through this lens. It was expansionist, technologically lopsided, and totally focused on controlling the population. It starts to look a heck of a lot like a classic imperial war, fought to maintain Western dominance in Southeast Asia.
This lens also forces us to grapple with a very specific and very durable form of empire, settler colonialism. And this isn't just something that happened in the past, it's an ongoing structure. See, the goal here isn't just to extract resources. The goal is to eliminate the native society and replace it with a new one, often using the legal myth of terra nullius, the idea that the land was empty and up for grabs. And we see the legacy of this structure playing out right now, today, in ongoing struggles by indigenous peoples all over the world for their land and their sovereignty. These movements, like the one in this photo, are a direct challenge to that old lie that their lands were ever empty. They are fighting for rights that were often guaranteed in treaties, only to be systematically ignored by settler states. So why does all this history matter so much right now? Well, because these ideas and these struggles, they are more relevant than they have ever been.
I mean, just think about the incredible scale of change in the 20th century. After World War II, this huge wave of decolonization created over 120 new states. That didn't just add a bunch of new chairs at the UN, it fundamentally redrew the entire political map of the world.
But getting formal independence didn't just magically wipe the slate clean. Those old colonial structures are still with us. You can see their fingerprints everywhere, in the makeup of the UN Security Council, in how migration is policed, in global trade rules that seem to favor rich countries, and even in climate change debates. And you can absolutely see it in the rise of global anti-racist movements like Black Lives Matter, which connect modern injustice directly back to the history of slavery and colonialism.
And all this leaves us staring at a massive question for the future. As global power continues to shift, will these rising powers in the East and the South, many of which have their own painful histories of being colonized, will they remember those struggles and try to build something different?
Or will they just end up conforming to the same old patterns of power and domination? Is the goal to create a more just and equal world? Or is it just to become the new boss, same as the old boss? That, right there, is the fundamental challenge this way of seeing the world forces us all to confront.